let's go ahead and show. Now, this is an example, Parker. This is sort of, I think, where a lot of people sort of, when we started posting game predictions at Sumer, people are like, wait a sec, this is Parker stuff. And we're like, yeah, it is Parker stuff because he created it. This is
shout out to a lot of my friends who got in Sumer's mentions like, hey, did you guys just copy this? And had to say, no, this is me. I did this. I posted this willingly.
Yeah, for sure. So this is an example. And look, like, you know, the market had the spread 13. You had it somewhere closer to 11. Like, that's not actually, like, you know, one of the things in gambling to realize is, like, know the value of a point. Like, 13 is probably, you know, 13, 12, and 11 are not worth that much in college football. So just know that. And a lot of people would have liked the under in that game. That's not really where I want to go. I kind of want to go to, Parker, if we look, let's say, at TCU for right now, like if we go down the column on TCU, you go ahead and explain sort of the metrics that you're using. Because to me, I think when somebody's trying to build a model, they sort of have to get the right features. And to me, this has a lot of the right features.
Yeah. And again, this is the whole goal of this is to be a one sheet. So you can look at the matchup and say, what do I need to know? What do I need to look for on the field to understand how this game's going to happen? I used to post these like back in 2019, 2020 without a score prediction or a win probability. And people were just, every week clamoring for it. So it's like, all right, I'll give the people what they want and throw that. But I do think that the projected points and the win probability are tertiary concerns to me on this. So the way that we start is kind of like, this is like a walkthrough of how I think about a game. And so we start on that left column right underneath TCU. You have your EPA margin. So again, per play efficiency, how much value on net are you adding? Offense versus defense. It's weighted slightly more towards offense, just again to kind of calibrate the predictive power. And so you see the raw offensive and then the rank there next to it. Same with defensive in the rank. So TCU 0.129 is 17th in the nation, and negative 0.006 is 50th in the nation. Darker blue is better. Darker red is worse. And so we start with just basic efficiency. That's a good overview, kind of a team strength, right? Georgia's 2, TCU's 19. Sounds about right. And then I break it down into success rates, which are just binary indicators of how well you did. Because again, I think efficiency and explosiveness matter most in college football, but like both of those happen. There are teams who are not very efficient, who are very explosive. TCU, great example. They're 83rd in a passing success rate, but if you look in the middle, they're 30th in EPA per pass. So it's like, yeah, we're going to miss, three out of 4 or 2 out of 3 passes, but when we hit that one, it's going to pop off. And so that's really informative as to what I'm expecting to see versus a defense. Cause then I can look over here and see Georgia, they're number 1 in passing success rate, and they're 33rd in EPA per pass on defense, or excuse me, 36th. And so it's like, can TCU, generate any consistency? So do that for defense as well. And then points per drive. I think the pace argument in college football is so important. So putting things in like per drive, per possession really matters. This gives you a good barometer of team strength. Also matches up really nicely with EPA margin raw. And all of these are unadjusted for opponents here. They get adjusted in the model, but unadjusted here. And then net field position, again, something I think that matters a lot more in college football than it does in the NFL, because there's so much more volatility with special teams.
Can you tell me the
turnovers.
The units? Can you tell me the unit? Is that yards? So they're 3.4 yards better than the average team? Okay.
No, they're 3.4 yards better at average starting field position than they are allowing. So if you look in the middle here, I've got field position. They're starting on average at their own 30.9, which is 33rd in the nation. But they are allowing opponents to start at their own 27.5, which is 17th in the nation. So that's gotcha. Okay. That's kind of the net. Where do we expect drives to start?
Gotcha. And those are in those middle tables right there that you can extract that from, the 30.9 and the 27.5. So that says a lot about kind of, I think about that, for the pro football, people, that reminds me of like the Alex Smith, Andy Reid years, where like they were always a yard, they were getting yards here and yards there. And you wonder, why are they winning all these games? It's like, well, they're kicking ass in special teams and not turning the ball over. And that's, sort of the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and in college football, it's funny too, because like you'll see like Iowa and Northwestern and Iowa State will be awesome at starting field position, but then terrible at points per drive. And that actually tells me a lot more about their offense than it does, whereas like a lot of teams, Baylor in 2021 was a good example. like something like 30% of Baylor's drives started in opponent territory, and almost 50% of their scoring drives started in opponent territory. And it's like, okay, if you get the ball at your opponent's 30 and you kick a field goal, that does nothing for your offensive efficiency for me, right? Like you were given a field goal based on a turnover. So we have to account for some of that, because if you don't, then what you start doing is you start overestimating the quality of an offense like Iowa's. And that's not something you want to do typically. So that matters a whole lot. The other two that I think are really important, because the rest of these just kind of break it down according to key features, but is this rush rate over expected? Again, a measure of style. So down distance, yard line, and score difference. How much more do you rush than the average team in college football? That's going to tell me a lot about pace mostly. And it'll help me kind of magnify differences. So TCU rushes a little bit more than average. This isn't a great example of it, but let's see. Oh, here's a good example. So if you look at the other side, Georgia is minus 1% rush rate over expected. They're rushing or passing more often. And then you look at TCU's passing defense is 60th relative to their rushing defense being 42nd in EPA per play. So that rush rate over expected helps me like magnify or amplify the how big of a deal it's going to be that you're bad at pass defense. And so because Georgia passes more, TCU's deficiency in the pass defense is going to matter a whole lot more, as we saw on the field there. Lastly, kind of a silly stat I made up, the ECKEL ratio. Got really annoyed by people posting about time of possession, because I think time of possession is dull and unwieldy. And so this is just the ratio of quality possessions, also known as drives on which it's more likely you score than you don't, which correlates about to like having a first down at the 37.5. And the opponent 37.5. So you just get a 1 or a 0 there. And the ratio is how much of those drives in the game did you control? It's directly stolen from the Corsi metric in hockey.
Interesting.
Which is,
yeah. So basically, how often do you get in field goal range ish? And then a ratio is how many such drives were yours in the game?
My quality possessions over total quality possessions in the game. Yep.
Okay.
And so TCU, 56.1% of all quality possessions in a game were theirs. And generally, because like finishing drives is kind of noisy and can talk about like your red zone, like a lot of offenses are good at moving the ball, but not good at finishing in the red zone. Because football is a game of opportunity, and especially college football, this gives us a little bit more of an idea of like a game control than a time of possession. Because it just says like how often are you getting opportunities to score relative to how much you're letting them up. And if you see in kind of the offense versus defense tab, I break that up into points per quality possession, points per ECKEL, and a rate, how often you do it on each side of the ball. That gives us a little bit more information as well. Again, just kind of a game control and really helps to say, are you controlling the opportunities, which is going to correlate with success more than, potentially overweighting the value of one play where you score at the end of a drive.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, I was watching my daughters play soccer yesterday, and it was like, I look over my wife, I'm like, they've been on our side of the field the entire game. And like, that's kind of what this is showing, right? Like where you're kind of the possessions, you're the only ones getting there. And then, to the middle table, it's what do you do with those possessions? Georgia there. Basically getting 5 points per every possession they get to the 35 or so, and that that's substantial. You're scoring quite a bit on those drives, and you're not turning it over in the red zone either or missing field goals, which is an important part of it. And when other teams get into that side of the field, they only allow 3.11 points, which to your point, like this is cool in that also because I think for most of these, I if I remember correctly, you do ranks by conferences when it's a conference game, right?
No, not here. These are all national.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, yeah. Like I think obviously if it was two like SEC teams, what would be cool is like obviously having the SEC rank, which will be, but for a non-conference game, obviously you have like all 131 teams in FBS, which sort of shows it's tough to be first or second when you're looking at, you're playing like Coastal has like the easiest schedule in college football and they're able to dominate. Georgia has to play through the SEC, and being second, for example, in EPA per rush allowed in college football and second in EPA per pass in all of college football is incredibly incredibly impressive, I would say. So this is really cool. Hopefully, we'll be seeing more of this on the Sumer channels and things like that. But I feel like this is, for all of the aspiring modelers out there, aspiring analysts, like it's all about having, you're took something from hockey. It's about having curiosity. It's about having a fertile mind and that kind of thing. And that's really the only way to win, because look, like the betting markets are an amalgamation of all the things we all know and an average over it. So in order to beat them, you're going to actually need to have some innovation and to think about things a little bit differently than everybody else and be right. Those are the two prerequisites to beating large markets, Parker. So very cool there.